calling out my wife's hypocrisy and double standards.
My wife has always been jealous of me. One of the recent examples of her jealousy turned out to be my new colleague at work, Anna. Anna was new and needed help at work. She asked me for paid tutoring at the workplace. I asked my wife for permission, and with her consent, I started tutoring Anna. Out of gratitude for the assistance at work, Anna gave me a ride home twice. I usually commute by public transportation. After these two instances, my wife forbade me from continuing the tutoring, instructed me to distance myself from Anna, and said she didn't want me ever getting into her car again. She justified this by claiming that Anna clearly wants to seduce me and desires me. I didn't like these unfair accusations and lack of trust, but logical arguments didn't reach my wife. I wanted her to meet Anna and see that she has no bad intentions, but she refused to even see her or hear about her. Out of concern for her well-being, I promised her I would agree to her terms. I would stop the paid tutoring, never ride with Anna gang, and limit one-on-one contact with her. I kept my promise. About a month later, my wife came up with the idea of driving to a new job in another town 40 kilometers away, with a colleague from her previous job, with whom now she wanted to work together again. I immediately disliked this idea. Firstly, I didn't want my wife to become so dependent on another man, and secondly, I immediately noticed her hypocrisy and double standards. She began telling me that it's different this time, because her colleague is married and expecting a child, and so on. Initially, I disagreed, but my wife kept insisting and pleading, justifying it with convenience, concern for her health, and the fact that she could drop off our son at school on the way, which would make our lives easier. Eventually, I agreed, under several conditions. It was to be only commuting to and from work, nothing more. She was to improve her driving skills enough to eventually start commuting by herself. I didn't want to hear anything about this colleague or the commutes. After all, she forbade me from mentioning Anna and instructed me to greatly reduce contact with her. My wife agreed, and despite doubts and bad feelings, I allowed these commutes. Unfortunately, my wife repeatedly broke these conditions even before the commutes began. Over the phone, sitting next to me, she began telling her friends how wonderful it will be commuting and working with such a great guy now. She described how tall and well-built he was, how he looked, how much he weighed, almost like she was impressed, boasting about it to people over the phone. She started repeating her new boss's words that at her new job, half the students immediately will fall in love with him while the other half will scared because of how impressive he is. I got angry with her and told her to stop admiring him so much. After she started commuting, her behavior and hypocrisy only intensified. She praised him even more and was happy about the good influence his presence at work had on her, saying she felt supported by him. She started listening to him more than me in many matters. She began taking free tutoring sessions from him in a subject she doesn't need for her professional work. She praised him for behaviors that she criticized me for. She constantly wanted to talk about her new job, unfortunately regularly returning to the subject of what a wonderful man she works and commutes with. So I decided that if every conversation about work had to end up talking about him, I didn't want to hear about her job at all. Once I came home after a week of very hard work, everything was cluttered and scattered around. The food I had prepared for dinner was eaten, and my wife was busy fixing up our son's old crib, which she now wanted to give as a gift in gratitude for the commutes to her wonderful colleague, because he's going to have a child soon. There were several similar situations in the first month of their commutes. Eventually, it also came to light that during their breaks at work, they go out for lunch together, shop together, and the weekend course my wife attended, of course, was a course that her colleague also attended. I was constantly angry about this situation and my wife's behavior. I was always walking around annoyed. That's probably why our intimate life practically ceased to exist. Eventually, after yet another incident, namely my wife secretly buying herself a vibrator, I got angry enough to yell at her that I've had enough of her hypocrisy, double standards, and breaking the boundaries we established together, and that her behavior is despicable. And at this point, I feel disgusted and lied to, and that in a situation when she violates my trust, we practically don't sleep together. She spends more time with her workmate and buys herself a vibrator. I feel betrayed. My wife was surprised, and in a way, she showed remorse and asked if she should quit her job. I said I didn't want such a drastic step, but she should limit those contacts and start keeping her promises. We threw away the vibrator, and she wanted to make it up with spontaneous sex, which I didn't feel like after all that. She started touching me, and I said at that moment I was disgusted by her and didn't want to be touched. The situation improved for a moment, but soon my wife completely started isolating herself from me, avoiding any closeness. Whenever she saw me, she lost her mood, didn't want to be touched or hugged. We were sleeping in different rooms, and now she started whispering to, apparently other people, over the phone during nights. After a few weeks, she yelled at me that she didn't care about my well-being and my boundaries. Now she sets her own, and that she is fed up with my moods and whims. And she will still commute with her colleague indefinitely because she wants to take care of herself and her future. Curiously, her future involves further continuing what has so far been destroying our marriage, which is becoming dependent on another man. She started accusing me of being authoritarian, narcissistic, having an inferiority complex, autism, and used some other labels. She said that the main problem in our relationship is how I behaved 7 years ago, 4 years before our wedding. At that time, when I was depressed, I said I wasn't sure if I could be happy with her. I admit this was a bad period of our relationship, but later things got better over time and we seemed to be really happy together until those unfortunate commutes started. Recently, after much persuasion, my wife finally agreed to marriage counseling. Unfortunately, after the first session with the psychologist, I still didn't see in her any remorse. Instead, I heard multiple instances of cherry-picking and the statement that I can't call her a hypocrite because the colleague she commutes with is happily married and has a child, whereas the friend she unjustly felt jealous of is single. Besides, my comment from 7 years ago affected her so much that something broke in her. Am I a jerk for calling my wife's attitude hypocrisy and pointing out her double standards?